All right. Okay. Well, oh, I see our faces. So that's a win. I know we're a little late. That's my fault because I was teaching right before this because as I was saying to Ken, I don't understand how calendars work. So, if I was a little more prepared, I would have actually had everything blocked out. But I mean, time has no meaning in a pandemic. So it's all fine. So good afternoon, Ken. How are you?
Hey, I tried to arrive an hour early, so time zones are kind of the end of everybody, I guess.
Time zones are brutal, and I actually was getting the pings on my watch as I'm lecturing, and I'm going, Ken's an hour early. I better text him and let him know. We don't start for another hour, buddy. I said noon central. So I
Well,
guess I'm not the only one who doesn't know how calendars work. It's fine.
I have a demo I use in my Java courses about finding the time zones in Antarctica,
Nice.
which are, as you might imagine, a nightmare. But the really funny part doesn't jump out at you until you look at the actual map. They have an image at Wikipedia, the time zones in Antarctica. The funny part is the South Pole, which has 6 months of daylight and 6 months of darkness, is currently on daylight savings time, believe it or not.
Nice.
Got to
Nice.
save that hour. Yeah,
Makes
because
sense.
they're following the time zone rules for New Zealand, so that's what does it. But anyway,
Okay. Okay, it's fine. It's yeah, I mean that's part of the bane of a software person's existence, isn't it? Dealing with time zones and calendars and all that. And oh, Dan
well, they
Vegas
say,
says, "Look at all this knowledge in one virtual room." Oh, Dan, you're too
Dan,
kind. Now, if we could
Dan's
get
the
Dan
man,
in the
though.
middle of this, then maybe we'd have some brain power. But not a lot of room in the kitchen right now. Let's just put it that way.
Well, he's your full stack developer, man. He goes from Vue all the way to Spring and back again.
Darn
I
right.
just focus on the Spring stuff. If I have to do anything JavaScript related, I call people.
Uh, and that's probably the right way to do it. I'm not gonna lie to you. So, well, I should have started by congratulating you. You are my returning champion.
Oh
You were my
wow.
very first guest. I went back and double checked. You, in fact, were the first guest on BCAC, and you're one of the people who actually understands the title more than others. And I don't know, like, you didn't learn your lesson. You came back for more.
Well, there's a problem, between the chair and the keyboard. So
Right.
it's still there. I'm
Problem
not sure what the
exists.
problem is, but I do remember contacting you for a completely unrelated reason. And you went, "Hey, by the way, I'm starting up a new podcast. Are you available?" And I'm like, "Hey, as it turned out. So it was just one of those. It really is who you know, I guess, sometimes. And there's got to be an advantage. I know you sometime. I mean, sooner or later.
I mean, I guess the advantage is I know the right places to go to get coffee, and I know the right places to go to eat.
At
So
UberConf, the Caribou Coffee was shut down.
what?
It was drive-through only and only for a few hours. And of course, you walked over there, they wouldn't serve you. And it was
You
just
they wouldn't even
pandemic,
let you
man.
like
After
walk through
pandemic,
the drive-through?
they kind of discouraged that. I thought about it. I did. But that was
Discourage
you're
all
the
you
one who
want.
introduced me to that. And I
Yeah,
was planning to go there. And I pulled a Venkat at that
I
conference. I think
saw
I
that.
mentioned.
Yes,
Yeah,
you mentioned that in your newsletter.
I did. Yeah, my
You
Tales from the Jar side. Yeah,
That's
I
right.
did a full Venkat, which is every talk in the conference, and then the Royal Venkat, of course, would be to add the keynote to that.
Right.
And then you were there at Rich Webb when you
Uh-huh.
did a royal, basically everything,
Yep.
and then he did a full metal Venkat by
Yeah.
arbitrarily adding another talk
Right.
just to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he just did an evening session, just impromptu for another hour, just so he could always and forever hold the title. And that's Venkat in a nutshell right there.
Yeah, I
You know,
know he would laugh at my lack of endurance, but you know what? I'm kind of tired still
I
from
bet.
doing all this
Well,
stuff.
to be fair, after I completed the Royal Venkat, I
Yeah,
very distinctly remember going into the hotel pool and just like floating there for about an hour and a
yeah.
half. And that was about all my mind could handle at that point because it's harder than some people make it look. Let's just put it that way.
It certainly was tiring, even though I
Yes.
did talks I knew, including the one on help your boss help you, the managing your manager book.
Managing your manager. So that's finally exists now. That's not just a pipe dream. That's out in the real world.
As Yeah, it's true that I'd threatened for years to actually take my managing your manager talk and turn it into book form.
Right.
And I never really got around to it. I mean, I teach a training class on the O'Reilly Learning Platform like you do on that topic. I recorded videos on it, things like that, but I never actually turned it into a book. And then one of the editors I knew at O'Reilly moved to Pragmatic Programmers, and she encouraged me to do it. And I got involved in the project, and it took way longer than I expected. Of course, I expected to just
Shocking.
write down my talk and that would be it,
Right.
right?
How
And
hard could it be?
oh yeah, and of course everything changed in the writing. I've got a lot more depth, a lot more. Hey, wait a minute, I got to think about this now, kind of stuff. But yes, the book was formally released at the end of July. I now know, by the way, that Amazon considers new releases to be exactly 30 days. And the reason I know
Really?
that is because the book showed up as #1 in the new release category in business ethics, which is a bit of an
Isn't
oxymoron.
it as okay? All
Yeah,
right.
go figure. And also in
Sure.
business communications. And it
That
it
one I get.
hovered between, yeah, it hovered between like 1 and 4 for 30 days
Okay.
and then dropped off entirely. So I now know new
Huh.
releases last for 30 days.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
good to know.
By the
Uh,
way, for what it's worth, this week I hope to release the ebook version. The
excellent.
ebook. I'm sorry, not the ebook. The ebook's at the Prags. The audiobook version. I actually
Ooh.
recorded an audiobook for it too.
Did you do the voiceover work yourself? Oh, good. Here
Yeah,
comes
I
my
did.
cat to
Everybody, all the books I
mess
read
with
and
things
everybody I
up.
talked to said they much prefer audio by the author, even
Okay.
if the author's audio not that great. Oh, we've got a.
My cat says
You're
hi.
paired with the cat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Han says hi. Hello. See, if you is it
Hey,
really a Zoom call if your cat or dog isn't part of it? I don't think so.
well, you always, that's a rule, right? You have to welcome the animal, and
Right.
and
Right.
yeah, I mean that's a good thing.
Exactly.
Any rate, so I the problem I've had with the audiobook is I have to listen to myself talk for 5.5 hours, and that's just really hard.
Right.
When I could finally get myself to do that, so I do the final QA pass, if you will, then I'll just push the button. But it's
Nice.
it's ready to go. I just have to do it. By the way, do I need to explain the T-shirt, or what do you think?
You probably should. Let me just say good morning, good afternoon to Code with Sean, who's joining us again this week. I appreciate that, Sean. You were a very vocal part of last week's session with Alan, so I'm delighted to have you back with us. I mean, to have Dan and Sean with us, I'm feeling pretty good. I think could be a good session, despite the fact that my cat very much wants to apparently mash on my keyboard. So at some point, he's probably just gonna like disconnect me or reboot my machine, or he did manage to kill my slides in the middle of my presentation on O'Reilly this morning. He like rolled over and hit a key, and I don't even know which key he hit, but all of a sudden it went to the very last slide. And I'm like, I guess I didn't even know that key existed in Keynote, despite having used it, daily for I don't know 15 years. So yeah,
Of
good times.
course, you use several thousand slides per presentation, so
How else could you do it? I don't understand.
yeah. Now, any rate, this is the a T-shirt from Star Trek Lower Decks. So this is the Ritos, short for the Cerritos, the starship on the animated series Lower Decks, which finished its second season relatively recently. I have a nice sweatshirt for Cetacean Ops, which I of course requested a transfer. But at any rate, I really like that series. That's really funny. So at any rate, I've been there, done that, got the shirt. There it is.
Perfect. Perfect. See, I just thought it was riots spelled wrong. You know,
Ah,
just misspelled because I can't spell anymore, and I just thought it was
and
a fat
also because
finger.
I'm such a rebel. Is that it? You know?
Yeah, I mean, when I think riotous individual, I think Ken Kousen. Let's be clear.
Yeah, I'm sure. Um, by the way, we are caught up on Ted Lasso as well. I know that's a common
Thank
theme on this
goodness.
podcast.
Yes, yeah,
Oh yeah,
it's almost a rule that we talk.
yeah.
I honestly I don't think Ted Lasso came up with Alan until the very end when I did a gratuitous Ted Lasso plug. But just in general terms, without any spoilers, what did you think of season two?
Oh, I thought it was excellent. I have built up enough trust in the writers that even though it started a little slow and interesting, I knew everything would eventually pay off, and it did. And
Yeah,
and of course, Roy Kent rules. You know.
I it's interesting because you can have that debate about who's your favorite character, and I really think Roy Kent character is
Oh,
top of the heap, darn close,
oh,
and
he's excellent. But they're
yeah,
all good.
oh
And
yeah,
football apparently is life. So
it is,
apparently,
it is. Football
yeah.
is life, and
So it would seem.
exactly, and the actor who plays Roy Kent, and I'm blanking on his name, despite the fact that he won an Emmy. He
Mm.
was on Seth Meyers' show and did like this little interview with him, and it was well worth like 7 minutes of your time to track that down if you had. It's very funny, and it's just interesting, a little bit of that inside story between like him and the actor who plays Jamie Tart. They apparently are they laugh a lot, and so whenever they like, if there was that one scene where they kind of go back and forth and reverse psychology and say this and
Yeah.
say that, and he
Uh-huh.
said, yeah, we knew this was going to cost Apple a lot of money because we were going to have to shoot that for about 5 days because they just crack up. And yeah.
But it's Brett Goldstein
Thank you.
is the name.
Thank you.
Well, thank Google. But I noticed that he's also. I noticed before that he's a writer on the show,
Hmm.
and it's wonderful when you get somebody who can write like that, who also is the
Right.
just the definitive role for him. I mean, it's going to make this guy's whole career.
Well, and
But
and that's
I
one of
like
the.
all the characters,
Oh yeah.
except of course for our bad guy. Now I don't want to put in the spoiler, but
Right, and that is so. Just for everybody to understand, at some point in the nearish future, Neil and I will have another. Busing will have. I will have another episode where we will discuss season two, and
yeah.
and he and I have actually even floated the idea of should we do like tech guys talk about Ted Lasso or something, and so we may end up trying to do like just go through every episode. I guess see time and whatnot gets us there. So uh, Dan also says that we got him, or I got him and his wife hooked on Ted Lasso, and I'm so glad
Ah,
that I pretty much anybody I've talked to in the last year plus since it came out, I'm like, you watching Ted Lasso? You're not watching Ted Lasso? You got to watch Ted Lasso.
it's the best written show in years. I
Yeah,
mean, in anything, it's
yeah,
just phenomenal. And these writers are so good; they will not disappoint you. I mean,
no,
you watch other series, and you just hope it's not a Game of Thrones situation where everything just becomes a disaster. No, these writers care, and they're writing great characters. By the way, have you watched the Dune movie yet, or the Foundation series?
I did indeed watch the Dune movie over the weekend, and I've not started
Mhm.
Foundations yet. I like to kind of let these things spool up a little bit so that I can kind of binge through them. I made that mistake with Snowpiercer where we
Oh,
started watching it before like the second season had finished, and then you ran into that wall. We were like, wait, what do you mean? Like the next episode's not out yet? It's
yeah,
just
right.
it's interesting how my viewing habits have changed over the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, you and I are both old enough to remember when shows were episodic and they would come
Oh
out
yeah.
and you had to wait. And if you missed an episode, well, bummer. Maybe in the summer you might be able to catch a repeat or something. And now the idea of, well, no, I just wait till the whole season's out and I just watch five, six, seven of them in a night.
Well, just as long as you know, Dune is half of the first book. It's not the whole first book; it's half of it.
Yes,
So it's
and
very
my
well done, but
yes,
we need the other half.
right, and my son, when he quickly recognized that this was not in fact the entire story, almost flipped the table and was like, "They better make another one. Where's the sequel? I need the rest of the story." And it's like, yeah, I'm really confident you'll get it. Just relax.
And Foundation, I don't know how well the ratings are doing, but we need to finish that. I mean, there's only been
Mm,
6 episodes in the first season so far. Expect there are 10. I haven't looked it up or anything, but I mean, I read those years and years and years
yeah.
ago. No, and I'm hoping, and so far so good, but we'll see if it pays off again.
So
Wait. Oh,
I,
go ahead.
I do want to touch on two more Ted Lasso things before we leap forward. And one, there was only one episode of the entire series so far that I would look at and be like, that one
Hmm.
was not my favorite.
Uh-huh.
And Neil knows which one I'm talking about, and I think most people who've watched it probably suspect which one it is. It was in the second season. It just didn't seem to quite fit, and it was just a little odd. Might be the best way to
Mhm.
phrase it. It was fine. My other concern with Ted Lasso is I would rather it end a season too early than a season too late because I always want to have that sort of good taste, so to speak, in my mouth about it. But I am afraid we're not going to get as much Ted Lasso as we might want. My suspicion is we're not going to get 10 seasons. This isn't going to be Friends.
Well, I mean, I'm happy with it so far.
Me too.
I'm hoping there will be another season. It didn't occur to me until the very last episode. I had no idea. That ex-husband, the who bought the other football team.
Hmm.
I didn't realize that was Giles from Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I had
Oh,
no idea.
yeah.
It
Christine
didn't
picked up on
connect.
that
So
right
I'm
away.
like, oh, look at that. So I need
Yeah,
to see more of him now.
yeah,
You know.
uh,
But yeah, I really just hope there's more.
yeah.
I've been disappointed with the latter day Star Trek series, like Picard really faded, and
Sure.
Discovery's okay, but Lower Decks so far is really that's fun.
Nice, nice, excellent, excellent. So let's talk about one of your favorite pastimes there. Now I don't follow the baseball as closely as you do, but
Uh,
I assume the Red Sox are in the World Series, right? They're a really good team.
their bats went silent at the wrong time, which happens in
It does
baseball,
happen. It does happen.
and they're out. And honestly, all that mattered, and really all that mattered, is they beat the Yankees in the wild card game, and that's all that mattered because they
100%.
finished ahead of the Yankees, and that's
100%.
good. Like I tell people in Java, an illegal state exception for me, that's New York.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Well, at
yeah.
least the Yankees. I mean, at least the Yankees.
Well, certainly, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and they're done, and that's perfect. And the Sox finished ahead of them. And if they lose to somebody else, I do have to say that between that chop and the Houston gambling stuff, I'm not interested in the World Series this year at all.
Yeah,
So
that is interesting. For those that don't follow it, the Astros got in some trouble because somebody was like banging on a can because they'd
trash cans,
realized
yeah,
they were using a camera to basically spy on the signal going from the catcher to the pitcher, and they were illegally basically transmitting that data to the hitters, and so the hitters were able to tee off because they knew it was coming. And yeah, I mean it's almost, at least that one was to me a real scandal, unlike Deflategate in the
yeah, right,
NFL. I
right.
think, especially given the NFL's sort of positioning around the 650,000 documents out of the Washington football team investigation, where certain ones are selectively leaking out to
Oh
end
yeah, and there's
careers.
nothing bad in any of the rest of
Oh,
them.
I'm
As
sure not. I'm sure
nothing.
everything else is totally fine. I mean, I don't, John Gruden doesn't deserve to have a job anymore from that perspective of what he said over email
Yeah.
of all things, and I think that there's clearly some issues there. But the more interesting question is, what else is hiding in those emails?
Well,
Who
I
else
mean,
maybe said some things they shouldn't have?
you're an architect, you talk about culture all the time,
Oh,
and
yeah.
clearly there's a culture involved here. It's not a bad apple or an
No.
individual. And by the way, bad apples make the whole barrel bad. So
Right.
it's
Right.
not exactly a good enough to say, oh, it's just one person. But we'll never be able to solve any of that. We're not going to get it. But I hear what you're saying. By the way, I gave you my dream scenario for Tom Brady then, didn't I?
No, don't tell me more. I do
Oh,
want to get your thoughts on his return, but
well, I'm
let's,
still rooting for him. I'm still happy with
sure.
that. Although I think about how different his career could have been if the tuck rule had not been enforced.
Good point.
The tuck rule only existed for a few years, and that was the biggest moment that anybody enforced it. And I'd watched football my whole life and didn't notice. That's that game against Oakland back in 2001,
In the snow.
and in the playoffs. And if he had not, if they had not called the tuck rule, then he would have fumbled away their one chance to go on in the playoffs.
Yep.
And he would have gone back to the bench, and Drew Bledsoe would have been the quarterback for at least the next year or two and
Right.
might have won Super Bowls. And then who would have heard of Tom Brady? I mean, eventually he would have gotten his chance.
Correct.
But how different would it have been from now? It's amazing how much your whole career could be affected by something that you had nothing to do with. I mean, he fumbled the ball, but
Right.
they called it the tuck rule and let him have an incompletion, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
No, I want him to keep doing well, and when he's 50, come back to New England and win another Super Bowl. And even better if it's the year after Belichick retires, although that's the unrealistic part. Belichick's never retired.
Completely unrealistic. They're gonna it's gonna come out of the on like Twitter, like, Belichick found dead in office while watching film.
Oh yeah.
There's no chance he's gonna retire, I don't think. But
Oh no, but wouldn't it be funny? I mean, either that or the aliens are going to come and take him back to his home planet.
sure,
Brady,
sure.
I mean, and because what other explanation is there, frankly,
Well,
at
I,
this
I
point?
think I sent you that tweet. It was top five quarterbacks of all time, and number one was Brady in his 30s. Number two was Brady in his 20s. Number three was Brady in his 40s. Then it was like Peyton Manning and then Brett Favre or something like that. I'm
I
like,
mean, he's
yeah, that's
made
about right.
someone who's watched him his whole career. He makes plenty of mistakes. He's
Sure.
very inconsistent at times, and his judgment can suffer. And yet, he's clearly got the numbers to exceed everybody.
Right.
It's just who knew when this kid came up in 2001. And by the way, he was good in 2001, but not great.
No.
If you go back and watch those games, he was better than average, but he wasn't carrying that team by any measure. And again, if they just not called the tuck rule, who knows how it all would have played out. Peyton Manning probably wonders about that all the time.
Well, absolutely. And, who knew this was going to turn into sports talk with tech guys? But
Yeah,
I
well,
use Brady a lot as an example of how hard it is to evaluate talent.
Right.
Because
Right.
this comes up a lot in our industry. How do you interview? And I know, I think it was Ali had something last week or the week before where it was like tech interviews and just how ridiculous they are. And we see a lot of examples of that. I've got some of my former students are going through some of this, and some of the stories they've told me just make me shake my head. But I think the reality here is it's really hard to do these evaluations. And I point to Brady because here's a sport where you have all these measurables. How fast are you? How high can you jump? How much can you lift?
Mm.
We've got hours and hours and hours of tape of you doing the job. We've got unlimited resources to kick over every rock. We can go back and talk to your third grade teacher and the person you briefly dated in ninth grade. And we can, get into every nook and cranny. And every single team in the NFL passed on him 5 times. Multiple teams in the NFL passed on him 6 times.
Right.
And is there any dispute that he should be in the Hall of Fame right now? I mean,
Yeah.
forget
Right.
the 5-year waiting rule. He
Right.
is a Hall of Famer, period, full stop. Maybe the
Well,
greatest ever.
in my mental bookmarks talk, mental bookmarks and the fractal nature of success, I talk about this so-called role of luck, which is really not luck, it's randomness.
Sure.
But you have to be in the right place at the right time. And one of my classic examples is a guy Brady lost to is Super Bowl MVP Nick Foles
Right.
for the Eagles. I mean,
Right.
who only got a shot again when the starter went down and had the right team with the right coach at the right moment and got hot.
With the
And the
right play
result is Nick
call.
Foles Super Bowl MVP, and it was deserved. And the next year he's back on the bench again for deserving reasons.
Right.
I also use the example of, say, like LeBron James has physical tools that would make him a star in any era on
Almost
any
any
team.
sport. Yep. And in
But
multiple sports.
Steph Curry needed the right coach and the right team to become a
Sure.
2-time MVP. I
Sure.
mean, he was great. Everybody knew he was great, but until he had the right coach, the right situation, or as we say, we said multiple times on the tour, you change your situation or you change your situation,
Right.
he wound up with the right coach, with the right teammates and the right system at the right moment in time where he let him shoot like that. And the rest was, I mean, the first unanimous NBA MVP. It's just
Right.
amazing how this happens. And in I keep calling it the Managing Your Manager book. But I tell you that we had to change the name. I referred to it as Managing Your Manager informally for years.
Yes.
And then sadly, it turned out I'm not quite as clever as I thought. Other people had used that term before, and therefore I had to come up with a new name like within a few hours. So, it was awful. So I
Naming things
contacted,
is hard.
well, yeah, naming things exactly. So I contacted, guy, I contacted Glenn Vanderberg,
Yes.
who wrote the foreword for the book, by the way. Glenn's wonderful. And he happened to be available. And we sat there and brainstormed for like an hour and finally came up with Help Your Boss Help You. And it's like, it's like you can watch people when I tell them that name. You could see the disappointment
Sure.
because it's not Managing Your Manager. But then over the next 5 minutes, maybe 3 minutes, you could see them talk themselves into it.
Yep.
Oh, I guess that makes sense. It is helping the body. It is helping you. I guess it works. And then they go, yeah, I guess it's fine. And that's all it ever gets to, by the way, is fine. It never gets to, oh, wonderful, because wonderful was Managing Your Manager. That was a good title,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I still use that in the elevator pitch, how to
of
manage
course,
your
of
manager,
course. But I think it's a good phrasing though, right? Because
Mm.
you need to be giving your manager the ammunition and the story to help you improve your career. I've used this story multiple times, but many years ago we all had old crappy laptops. We wanted new laptops.
Mm.
Okay, well your first approach to that is go to your manager and whine and say, I want a faster laptop. Your manager can't do anything with that. Your manager goes to the director or the VP and says, hey, the developers are all whining, they want faster laptops. And the VP looks at them and says, I don't care, not my problem, get out of my office.
Mm.
You need data. And so what did we do? We started tracking how much time are we essentially wasting with these old machines. And we figured out it was about 2 hours a week per developer. Well, now you go to your manager and say, how would you like to save the company $75,000?
Right.
And now your manager can go to their boss and be like, hey, save the company some money if you get us some new laptops. And all of a sudden, whoa, hey, I can put that on my accountabilities. Guess what? I'm getting a bonus this year.
Yeah, I always use the stories like that about when people say, how do I make it more likely to get promoted? And I say, you have to imagine that your manager is in a room with a bunch of other managers debating promotions, and you're not
Yes.
there because you can't be there for that.
Mm-mm.
You need that person to be your advocate, and you need them to have reasons why you're already doing the promoted job. You
Right.
just aren't getting credit for it, and they might lose you otherwise. It's all about the relationship. And in fact, that's what the book's about. It's about building a relationship with your manager that's a professional one. And I try to emphasize the fact that you don't get the relationship you want by just doing what your manager tells you all the time,
Right.
because then they have no incentive to modify their behavior to take into account your desires, so of course you can't not do what they want because you don't want to get fired, but it's got to be a give and take. You have to be able to
Yes.
push back in ways that don't threaten the loyalty relationship. And we talk about that a lot in the book, about how you go about pushing back on the relationship itself, and how you the real goal is to get your manager to take your needs, your desires, your goals into account when they make decisions that affect your career.
Yep.
And that's what it's really all about.
Yeah, I think a lot of software people, we lose sight of the fact that when it comes to promotions, raises, bonuses, all of this stuff, your manager goes into the proverbial smoke-filled room with
Mm,
her peers, and they're all trying to argue on behalf of their staff for a limited pool of resources.
right.
And if you have not given her the ammunition she needs to fight that fight, she's going to lose. And it isn't always just that manager too. You've got to get that message out to other people so that when
Right.
she's in that room, everyone's like, yeah, yeah, you're right. Ken did solve this problem. Ken did do this. I can't prevent that one. Like I don't have any roadblock I can throw in the way of that. So I got to give you Ken,
Well, and
but
then we add in the problem that the managers we deal with as technical people are the lowest rung on the totem pole. So they
right,
have no power and no money anyway. So
right.
they're already feeling like they're can't get anything they want. Also, they tend to be either rookies at this, like they were promoted into it from tech jobs, or they just brought in from outside or something. Again, they're the low rung on the totem pole. You can find them anywhere.
Yeah,
Or there never will be. The people that are just considered, okay, you're never going to rise in the ranks. We'll just have you manage this group. And
yeah,
and of course, then to make it all worse, everybody in an organization has to act like they know what they're doing. I mean,
right.
otherwise nobody has confidence to trust you to do the job for them. So even these managers who don't have the same technical skills as their experts, of course, why would they? They're not supposed to have to act like they know what they're doing when they're making decisions that affect us. It's not a surprise that the relationship between tech experts and management tends to be a rocky one. It's just there are ways to build the relationship so that you give them what they need
Right,
in a way that doesn't hurt you,
right, right.
and makes them your ally in that room. But because if they're not your ally, you're not going to get anything.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of horse goes on.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of, well, I'll tell you what, I'll give you Ken if you give me Kathy. Don't block Kathy and I won't block Ken. And uh, I know it we don't like to talk about it in those terms, but that is what's going on in many of these situations, and I remember the realization I had when all of the junk I had to put into those annual reviews was meaningless. Those decisions
Right.
had already been made. Most of those decisions are made over the summer and the budgeting cycle, and it's only once we actually have the meeting with you that well, now I got to create a story to
Justify
justify a
it.
decision that was made 5 months
Uh,
ago. And it doesn't really matter what you wrote on this piece of paper or what you submitted to HR. I mean, it goes into your record, I guess, which might be useful in the future, but it really doesn't have much impact, which is unfortunate. But
Well, the one review I always got that came up multiple times in my career was talented but high maintenance. I know you find that hard to believe. And one example of that is the way I used to do my because my boss would come into my office and say, write up your accomplishments this year. Well, that's how I would do my objectives. I would
sure,
figure out my objectives by going, okay, what did I do
right,
last year? And okay, some of them have to be stretch objectives, right? I have to exceed something, and some have to be not quite, but have to, so I do them all retroactively and write it all out that way. And just, these days I'd use like a Pomodoro, I'd set
yeah,
the timer,
yeah,
write out some nonsense and just supply it. Yeah, high maintenance, you understand.
totally, totally. And the other thing I've always tried to have in the back of my head is I never wanted to be my manager's number one problem.
Ah,
I always
interesting.
wanted to be like, okay, Nate's got it covered. I don't have to waste a lot of extra cycles thinking about Nate. You know,
Yeah, I
and
give that the phrases I use for the two messages you always want to send to your boss. One of them is that it's I got this. That's the message they want you want them to believe. Yeah, whatever it is, yeah, I got this. And the other is I got your back.
yeah,
And that's the part where most IT people tend to fall short
sure.
because they don't think in those terms, not because they really don't have the back. It's just they don't think that way. And therefore, we emphasize it a lot. But the I got this message is the trust one that you need your manager to know. And by the way, I always point out, I got this doesn't mean you know every step of the
No.
task that you're being assigned. It means you'll take responsibility for it.
Hmm.
And like I use the example of like when early in my marriage, you know how there was the normal division of labor among housework,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to do laundry,
Okay.
and therefore I would request very detailed instructions, which I would then somehow mess up anyway, because of course I didn't want to do it. And that's
Sure.
the opposite of taking responsibility. And the fact that I learned enough to know better now, you know, it's why we're still together. But yeah, it's you want to give them the message that look, if there's a problem, I'll tell you about it. I'm going to do whatever I can do to figure it out. I'll give you options. I'll identify other issues that come up, but I got this. You can trust me to take my best stab at it and to let you know when problems arise early enough that we could replan. But the I
Reach that point in your career where you realize, oh no, I can't avoid them. Like these issues are real, and I have to take ownership of it.
But that's what your manager's for, is to fight the political battles that you don't want to get involved in. It's to look out for you in the organization when you don't want to have to do it. It's to publicize your successes that makes the team look good. I mean, you have to do some of it, but there's a reason why you actually want an ally, you know, that
Hmm.
does things that you don't do. It's so you can go focus on the part of the job you want.
Right. Right.
But at any rate, you know, all these things are, I mean, I've made every mistake you could possibly make, I think. And that's where the book came from is this, the, like, okay, I did this wrong. I did that wrong. Like your boss is not your friend. I lived on that the first few years that I was in business, thinking if my boss was my friend, then when I screwed up, they'd be more likely to protect me. And it's like,
Sure.
no, no, no. I actually had a friend say to me once, or somebody I talked to about this, said they actually said to their boss once, how could you do this to me? I thought you were my friend. And the boss responded with, if you were my friend, you wouldn't have put me in this position. You know what I mean? It's
Ooh.
your boss is not your friend. And you see this on television constantly. We're talking about all these TV programs. In every TV program where there's anything like an office, everybody becomes friends. And it's worse, they often become basically family. And the
Yeah.
manager takes on this parental role because it's television. People never leave. They'd have to leave the show. I called it the Riker problem, going back to Star Trek. I mean, why wasn't Riker a captain? Because the actor would have to leave the show and everything else was window dressing, you know? And they try to justify it and have this reason and that reason. It's like, no, it's because he doesn't want to leave the show.
Right.
And, you know, but every TV show, you've got Hollywood actors who are very charismatic, attractive people, or they wouldn't have gotten the job in the first place. And of course, eventually there's some special episode about everybody, even the bad ones, you know, become sympathetic over time. And it's like, that's not the way the real world works. People come
Yeah.
and go in the real world all the time. You know, your boss is not your friend. Now, I say that and say, well, you don't have to say to your boss, you're not my friend. It's
Right.
protection for yourself so that you know internally when your boss does something that goes against you, it wasn't personal. It just fit
Yeah.
their agenda and not yours. And that happens. You'll have things that fit your agenda, not theirs. Also, the other problem I had when I was younger in my career is the oversharing problem. Is that the boss
Mm.
would say something like, so how was your weekend? And I wouldn't say this, but you could say things like, oh, it's been trouble at home because I'm spending too much time in the office and I don't that my wife's mad I'm not spending time with the kids and this, that, and the other. And the boss is thinking, I was going to offer this big project or promotion, and now I don't want to do it because, I mean, after all, I don't want to cause more trouble at home. And you
Right.
don't want them thinking about that,
Right.
you know? So, how was your weekend? Fine. How was yours? You know, you don't have to not be friendly. Being
Yes.
friendly, of course,
Yes.
everybody wants to be friendly, but your boss is not your friend. And that's really hard when sometimes your boss is really a good person. you
Right.
know,
Right.
you want to be friends,
Well,
but oh
Sean
well.
Sean nails this in the comments. He says friendly does not mean friends.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
in a nutshell. And again, it took me years of oversharing to break myself of
Sure. Sure.
yeah,
Is
now
there
I'm a one person company, so everybody, every client I have is my boss basically.
I was gonna say you must have some really interesting reviews, when you're lashing yourself over things and
Oh, yeah, and I was somewhat I had this tendency to push back too, and see, the problem is when the same problems happen over and over and over again, eventually you start to realize that where's the common factor in
yeah,
that? Well, it was me, you
it's
know.
me.
And I realized, yeah, I'm doing it wrong. And
Yeah.
I'm not saying I'm necessarily doing it right now, but I'm not making the mistakes I made earlier. And when I push back against, I have a whole section you'll appreciate on truly unethical managers.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and you understand that one. And every time I push back and it works in a case like that, I'm always surprised.
Yeah.
So,
No, and that so one of the things I was pondering here is there any particular like advice that you would have if you go back in time, like what would you have told
mm.
your younger self? I mean, did you think the talent but high maintenance was like a hindrance? Would you want to change that if you could?
Well, the one specifically for me personally was your boss is not your friend. That's why I hype
Yeah.
on that so much because that was my problem. But the biggest thing that I wish I'd known when I was earlier, because academia teaches you the exact wrong lesson here, is the concept of a good enough answer. That when you're in school and a teacher asks you a question, they have an answer in mind. They're trying to evaluate whether you know it and can you show your work? Can you show it the
Right.
way they want to see it? But if someone in business asks you a question, they're stuck. They don't actually have an answer. They just want anything that helps them move forward.
Hmm.
You know, I use the example of like, you use Git all the time, right? I mean, we all do. And there are things I can do in Git because I do them all the time.
Yeah.
And if I have to do anything unusual, well, that's why I contact Raju. I mean, I don't
Yes.
know. I'm going to get
Yes.
messed up and I'll send him a question. And then you wait and you wait and you wait and you're getting madder and madder. And, you know, maybe I'll see him on a Zoom call or something. It's like, why didn't you answer my question? He says, well, I've got 6,000 unread emails. Yeah, I know, but why didn't you answer mine? You know, and it's like, how much worse is that coming from your boss?
Yeah.
Your boss asks you a question, something ridiculous, like how is AI and machine learning going to affect our primary product in the next 5 years? And you're like, my boss knows I'm not an expert in that. What is
Right.
he asking me for? Is she asking? By the way, I solved the way I dealt with the he or she problem in the book is I adopted the singular they.
Yeah.
That does seem to be catching on, and
I
it actually
agree.
was not that hard to adjust to, interestingly enough. Anyway, they send you a question that is an open-ended question you have no idea about. And now I know all I have to do is set the timer, you know, one Pomodoro maybe, or 20 minutes, whatever. And you write down, look, I don't know, but
Yeah.
here's what I know. Here's what I think is going to happen. Here's the steps I would take to find out. See, there's your rough cost estimate. And then the magic question at the bottom, do you want me to look into it? Let
Right.
them make the decisions to where this is supposed to disrupt real work or not, you
Right.
know? But the benefit of doing something like that is it makes you look responsive because you are. It gives them information they didn't have so they're not stuck. And you reply to them right away, which always looks wonderful to anybody. I mean, everybody values others who respond. I mean, by the way, that's a Venkat thing. Do you notice that whenever you send an email to Venkat, you get an answer within a couple hours? You know, and you know
He
how
is
busy Venkat
he
is.
is remarkably lifelike. I mean, they just nailed that. I mean, I think he's Westworld really was based on Venkat. Let's be fair.
I hear that. I mean, I've tried to adopt that same mechanism of responding as quickly as practical. I mean, not immediately, but especially to requests from people who are managing me at this given moment,
Sure.
even if I give them incomplete requests that are just, quote, good enough. Because 90% of the time or more, the response from that is, yeah, that's all I needed. Yeah, you don't have to do anything else. And it's off my plate so I can get back to real work. And I gave them something. I mean, who knows why they asked the question? Maybe they were in a meeting and
Sure.
another manager brought it up, or maybe the vendor is harassing them about selling of a product, or maybe they read an article somewhere and they just thought, you know, I'm just going to ask all my people what they know.
Yeah.
and you've responded, and it always makes you look good just to be responsive, even if it's not enough. Even if they come back to, yeah, you know what, I think we better look into this, then you'll be like, okay, how do we replan all my existing projects?
Right.
That's all.
Right. Exactly. And
Yeah, because then they're part of they're an ally. Then you're the back part of
exactly.
the team again. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, so
I wish
Sean,
I'd known that one when I was early in my career.
oh, 100%. So Sean says a
I
boss
did.
can be a friend, and I agree totally. And I've had bosses that were my friends, still are my friend.
Yeah,
This is the important thing. My career is not dependent on that relationship.
that's a good way to put it. Actually, I like that.
Yeah.
It's really more of your boss is, you know, you can be friends when things are going well.
Yeah.
It's like in anything in a company, any management structure works when the company's making tons of money. When things go bad, that's
Oh,
when things come under stress. And suddenly your boss is making decisions that seem like they go directly against what you want. And the question is it, I mean, I don't know about you, I need the emotional distance not to take that personally, to understand it was a professional
right.
decision. It wasn't about me necessarily, like that. And, you know, again, it's easy to be friends when everything's working. It
Yes.
only comes under stress. And you don't, I'm not saying don't be friendly. It's just if you think your boss is your friend, you'll fall into these traps. So just watch out, just protect yourself so that you
Yeah.
don't fall into the assumption of taking it personally or the oversharing part, and just treat it accordingly. That's
Yeah.
all.
Well, and I think we all need to have an understanding of the constraints our managers are working within as well.
Oh my goodness.
You know, I think we've all had that scenario where, wow, you just hired someone in and they're making 20% more than me, and
Mm,
yet I've got more experience, I've been doing this longer, I'm better at it. How come they're
yeah.
making more than me? And it's like, because that's what market is now. And you know, you've got options there, obviously. You can go get another offer, you can leave, etc. But you also then have to accept, well, if your HR minions have decided the largest raise we can give someone on a promotion is 14%, that's all. Maybe maybe she can eke out another, like a mid-year promotion or a mid-year raise or something. But you kind of have to understand the constraints that they work within, you know, and it's unlikely they're going to be able to, you know, turn water into wine.
That was another harsh lesson I didn't know when I was a rookie. HR is not your friend. HR is not your ally. They're not on your side at all.
No.
HR exists to make the company, to keep the company out of trouble.
Yep.
So they're there to enforce policies that make sure they satisfy legal requirements. They're there to make sure the company doesn't overpay for similar people to you. And they're there to make sure that if anything reaches the press, it's handled well.
Yeah.
And if you get into a conflict with a high level manager, even a low level manager, HR is not going to be on your side. Now, if it's the
Right.
sort of thing that might cause legal problems, they will do whatever they can to make those problems go away. And that may not be what you want as
Right.
well. And I've heard from person after person after person that they find this to their shock. I mean, you know, because there's always a question, especially to women or underrepresented minorities when they run into problems. Did you talk to HR? And the answer is usually yes, and nothing happened. And I'm sitting here like, yeah, I'm not at all surprised. I mean, HR wants the problem to go away.
Right.
Now, that doesn't mean there aren't good people there. I've met some wonderful HR people,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
but their job is to make the company look good, not to make you get what you need or what you
Right.
want. It's a shame that way.
Yeah, and I think the other piece of this too, that you and I've talked quite a bit about, is we have to take responsibility for advocating on our behalf. You know, I
Mm,
think some of us are very passive and we're like, well, I'm doing good work. My manager sees that and she'll do me
yeah.
right. And you know, some absolutely will, but again, we have to be the ones that are giving them that story. And if there's something we really need or want, you got to push for it. You got to ask. You got to keep poking. It can't just be, well, you can read my mind, right? You know this is what I want to be when I grow up. So how come you're not helping me get there?
That's why you need the periodic meetings too. One
Yep.
of the worst managers I had in terms of skills, he was a very nice person, but his skills were not good, was one of my earliest ones. And he was a tech guy who wanted to stay technical and was never going to rise in the management ranks because he was never quite going to, I call him a fear driven micromanager, actually, you know, But the thing that actually saved him in his management job was he finally established weekly meetings with all of his direct reports. They
Sure.
were short meetings, but it was enough to say, what did you do last week? What are you going to do next week? And what's going on in your world? What do I need to know about?
Mhm.
And it was remarkably helpful because that way I could bring up issues that were longer term that I cared about on a periodic basis. Just like you say, by the way, what do I have to do to get this opportunity over here? Or what skills do I have to acquire to work with this? And am I making any mistakes? It's an opportunity to catch problems while they're problems and not
Right.
crises. Every good manager I've ever known, especially guys like Glenn,
Yeah.
always do this. They immediately set that up. It's the bad ones or the rookies or the ones who are insecure, feel like they don't have anything to contribute or afraid of being called out. They're very, very reluctant to do this. And yet building the relationship, another thing you actually alluded to, reading the person's mind. Well, it's not that, it's more like, I need to know you well enough to know whether what you're saying is why you're saying it, and vice
Sure.
versa. Like the boss needs to know, if you're venting about a problem, is that your normal way of learning, of going through the problems in any project and you'll be okay eventually, or is there a crisis they need to intervene in?
Yeah.
You need to know, is this statement made by my manager because their boss told them this is how it's going to be, or is this something they really believe? And the only way you're going to know that is by getting to know them personally over time in these periodic meetings and pushing back occasionally so they know
Right.
what matters to you. But then you go back to work.
Yeah.
So it may feel like you didn't get anything, but you're building the relationship, and that's the key.
Well, and then that also gives you the opportunity for that feedback to happen when problems are littler and easier to
Mm,
fix, and you can start
exactly.
correcting instead of what I mean. This happens in every relationship or lots of relationships. The little thing, little thing, little thing, and then big blow up, and it's like, where'd that come from? And
Right.
and those are much worse. Much better to have a little conversation. Hey, we noticed you were working on this thing. We really need you working on that. I'd rather have those little course corrections than, oh, we just crashed the plane and everybody's dead.
And I try to tell people that, I mean, nobody wants a conflict with their boss, even though
No,
conflict is inevitable because you want different things. The first time you push back, it's scary.
sure.
But the second time, it's much easier. And the third time and the fourth time. And if the boss learns that you're going to push back, but then you're going to get back to work, that this is not a crisis. This is not, if you don't give me what I want, I'm out of here. It's
Right.
much more of a, look, now you know that this mattered to me. Next time you make a decision related to this, I'm going to be back in here again.
Right.
And they get that. It helps build the relationship. Not to mention the fact that the first thing they're going to ask you at HR when you do your exit interview, did your boss know you were unhappy? Yep, I pushed back this date and this date and this date. And oh, yeah. You never want the fact that you're leaving to be a surprise to your boss, because
Sure.
that means both sides missed any chance at all to fix this.
Yeah.
So all that's related. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
That's
all in there.
that's a great point.
Oh, which reminds me, by the way, I should give you a coupon code for the people who might want it
Sure.
for the book.
Sure.
Um, it's just KK Manage, my initials
Your
and then
initials.
KK Manage 35. You
Okay.
put a 35 at the end and you get a 35% discount. Now, this only works at the Pragmatic Programmers site.
Okay.
If you want the physical book, that's on Amazon. I don't have any control over that. Um, I have not, by the way, tried putting in KK Manage 80 just to see what would happen, or 105 to see if they would pay you to take it away.
I mean,
If that works, please let me know.
gonna hope that they've got that worked out. Oh, that's interesting. So Code with Sean says the personal part I appreciate is when they make those kinds of decisions and they can explain, what they can as they can. And then,
Mm.
oh, he asked for a link to the book. That's not a bad idea. I wonder how quickly.
Here, I'll
Yeah,
put it in the chat.
yeah, put
I'll
it in the
put it in the
Zoom
Zoom
chat,
chat, and
and
then
then
you can echo it if you like.
I'll throw it out there. Bring up my wonderful chat window. Oh, good.
There you go.
Decided to overlay
There's
it right
the,
on top of my screen, which I'll get to see that. So
you
copy.
can echo that in Twitch if you like. I mean, the
Yes.
Amazon one, just search under my last name, you'll find it. But there's the Prog link. And here's, by the way, there's the coupon code, if I spell it right.
There's the link and code.
I hate coming across like I'm trying to sell it, but I think that the book has a lot to benefit, especially employees who are relatively early in their career.
Totally.
Again, because it's mostly mistakes I made over the lifetime, and people like Glenn and others seem to think very highly of it. So
Awesome.
there's good stuff in there. But again, take or leave anything you want, especially if you are not like I mean, I'm clearly an older white male with all the privilege that goes with that. So if these things don't work for you or your background is sufficiently different, yeah, I totally get that. And if you want to push back against me, I'm fine with that too.
Nice, nice.
you know?
First time chatter from G Locker 102. Hello. I never quite know what to make of all our handles that we throw out there,
Oh
so
my, yeah.
it's
I'm terrible at
fascinating.
that.
Well, I think my handle on here is like Purple Regret, which is actually based on a science fiction book, and it had this fantastic line of this drone changed to the color of purple regret and gunmetal puzzlement, and it just totally resonated for me, and
Here, I
it made
thought
me
it was a
laugh.
drink you had
So
once. Yeah.
no, but I mean, I'm sure it is somewhere. Let's be honest. And then I got another hello from another first time chatter, Death Packs. Okay, all right, it's
Ooh,
all
good
good.
one.
So Kodo Sean says my book is about out, so push your book. So yeah, we're all about it's. We're just making people aware. We're just sharing information,
Well,
right?
and the other thing is I try not to be I mean, yes, as you said, like in an organization, you have to do some self-marketing
Yes,
because, and this, by the way, is why people are always more extroverted on the job than they are in real life,
sure.
because it's a survival skill.
Yep.
You have to let people know what you're doing, but as long as you do it as part of a team and as part of, with where you're not hurting anybody else in the process,
Yes.
most people don't mind. Like
Right.
if you don't like the book, that's fine. If you do like it, great. I'd love to hear it. But and if you decide, yeah, I'm not interested in books like that, that's fine too. But yeah, I do have to overcome the even though it doesn't seem like it, the natural reticence to talk about
Right.
the book and
Right.
myself and all that.
Oh, I hear you. Oh, it's been my internet handle since the late '90s. Sometimes I guess we run into that, right? The death packs.
Oh,
So it's funny to me how that works. You get on some system and your preferred username is taken, and then you end up, well, I guess
right.
I'll try this.
Yeah,
And away we go.
it's one of the few remaining areas of creativity, like naming your machine.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
speaking of which, are you going to get one of the new? Like Dan Vega just ordered one of the new boxes with the M1 chip in it, the M1X.
I,
Are you going to get one of those?
not yet. I mean, my current machine's only like a year old, so I don't have a good justification to recycle it. Although I wouldn't mind having ports again.
I'm totally going to get one. It's just expensive enough to make me hesitate,
Sure.
but I'm definitely doing it. I want a machine that will not do what my current machine is doing, make the fan run constantly during a Zoom call.
Yeah, that
I
came
know
up on
that's,
Twitter, and my
yeah.
response to that was, "Yeah, that doesn't happen. Impossible. Sorry."
Hey, I was giving you your segue to say it again. Yeah.
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
no, I'm definitely going to do it sooner or later. I just haven't yet. But what I was going to say is when you name machines on the network, there's always clever naming schemes. Like I
Yes.
always used to use Worlds from Babylon 5. I had a Narn and a Centauri and an Earth, etc. And of course, a Zahadum was the server, because if you go to Zahadum, you will die.
Nice.
Uh, oh
Nice.
yeah. And when I was a grad student, there was uh, a workstation with a bunch of remote terminals that were chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. The server was called Ice Cream, of course, which I thought, oh, that's a good one. So I always
Well
enjoy things
played.
like that.
Well
It's
played.
related to the idea of a person's handle online, but I've never come up with a clever handle for myself. I just always my last name's unique anyway,
That
so I
helps.
don't have
That
it.
helps.
I
But
found out, by the way, I didn't tell you this. We found a branch of the family that I didn't know
really,
about a year ago. Yeah, we discovered some uncles. I had no idea. It turns out my branch of the family is the only one that pronounces my last name like the relative. We're the only ones that call it cousin. They all
really
called it Kousen. And I'm like, what? I've been correcting people my whole life. And they said,
interesting.
no, it was Kousen. I'm like, one of the four brothers, there were four brothers. One of them, the one that's my great grandfather, went with cousin, and all the others went a different way. And now they're all gone. I don't know what the reasoning was.
Right. And there may not have been a good reason. It might just been like, I don't like my brothers.
He was
So
an odd duck anyway, though. I
yeah,
mean, he was a strange person. I know you find that shocking.
I'm stunned. Stunned. Well, so Sean says that naming kids is hard too. Child unit number two. I
Oh,
like that. I will admit that when Everett was born, he was baby Shooter for I think at least a dozen hours or so because he came a little early, and so we'd only culled the list down to like top 10. And I will never forget, and I don't remember if it was day or night because time has very little meaning when you've gone through the middle of that. And my wife kind of shuffled over and said, I think he's an Everett. And I'm like, completely agree. I am not. After
Wow.
what you just went through, 100%. If she would have come over and said, I think he's a Liam, I would have been like, great. Liam would be wonderful. You know, whatever she would have said at that moment, I was absolutely not going to
Yeah,
contradict her.
I get that. My boy was going to be Alexander,
Yeah.
but and actually he was going to be Ramsey because my wife's maiden name is Ramsey. So he was going to be Ramsey Alexander, but we knew we'd never find a tricycle license plate with Ramsey on it. So we were going to go with Alexander. The
Yeah.
problem is when he was born, so were 20 million Alexanders and about
Right.
10 million Alexandras. So we knew shortening to Alex was going to be impossible.
Sure.
So he is and has always been Xander. And he picked it with an X. And we call him Xander, which of course we could never find a tricycle license
No.
plate with Xander on it either.
No, never
But
gonna
that's
happen.
what he's been ever since. You just never know. I mean, I had all these impressions of him in my head until I actually met him, and he turned out to be, you know, totally himself, totally different from what I was expecting.
So Deathpack says that he and his wife just came up with their own new last name when they got married.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I should have done that.
I've
I
known a
should have
couple people
taken,
who did that actually,
yeah.
and then two of the kids have name combinations of TV shows, fictional characters. It's funny. I have a cousin who, when their son was born, they named him Will,
Ah,
and then their daughter was born, and they named her Grace. And
oh
so we all
boy.
kind of like Will and Grace, and they're like, "Oh, the
Seriously.
show's off the air. Nobody will even know."
Oh, by the way, did you know that Brad Pitt's brother, and this is serious, I'm not making a joke about this. Brad Pitt's brother's name is Doug.
Doug Pitt.
His parents named him after digging a hole. I can't believe it. Doug Pitt. Seriously, look it up. I mean, it's
All
like, oh
right,
my goodness, you got to be kidding me.
nice.
But that's Brad Pitt's older brother. I think it's older. At any rate,
You know what?
yeah,
Naming
you never
naming
know.
things is hard. If you've ever
Naming
looked at
things is
source
hard.
code, you know
Yeah.
how hard it is to name things. That's why it's Foo and
Oh yeah.
Ba
Well, like I
and a
said, I went through
wombat.
it with the title of this book, so I know.
No, no, it's brutal. It's brutal. Naming things is hard. Oh man. So what else is new and exciting? I was trying to think this morning, like, what questions didn't I ask you on the first instance, and we haven't even touched on anything I was even pondering. So what else is new and exciting?
I don't know what you were pondering. I mean, I've been playing more chess lately. I'm going to another chess tournament
Oh, this
in a
guy.
week in Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm among rated players. I'm considered mediocre,
Gotcha.
which
Gotcha.
is nice, you know.
Yeah,
But I'd like to be a lot higher. It also
sure.
seems to be a nice activity that I could do. That, you know, anything to get you out of your head so that you're not thinking about work all the time.
Yeah.
You know, it seems to be a nice activity to do. So that's fun. Of course, I watch the grandmasters online all the time. That's a lot of fun.
What was the show? The Queen's Gambit or something? Wasn't
Yeah,
there?
that was
Yeah.
the Netflix show that was succeeded by, of all things, the Squid Game. Did you watch Squid Game?
No, not yet. I'm
Oh,
not sure
it's
how
a
to feel
piece
about
of
all
work.
this.
It's one of the things that my son and I completely disagreed on.
Okay.
I found it appalling in many ways, and he loved it. So, I mean, I put a link in the latest newsletter to those two
Sure.
ladies from The Take. They have a YouTube channel called The Take. They did a wonderful description of Squid Game as a criticism of capitalism that kind of backed off at the last minute.
Sure.
But they're always clever. I support them on Patreon. And this was a great video that they did, and it just came out within the last week. If you want a link, I'll send it to you. But
Sure.
it was in last week's newsletter, the one that came out yesterday,
Okay.
also. So if you're interested and you don't want to watch it, because of course it's filled with spoilers, you know.
Okay.
But most people, like, I would never get my wife to watch it. She would hate it the whole time
Sure.
because they're bad people doing bad things, and it's just disturbing the whole way through. But I got wrapped up in it, and I
Mm,
couldn't let go until I watched the whole thing. And I knew my son was watching it, so you know,
right.
it gives us something to talk about. You
Sure.
know,
Sure.
but at any rate, there's a good video if you're interested in
Okay.
why it was so appealing and what they were trying to say, and the sets and the costumes and everything. They were gorgeous. They were phenomenal. But it's a heavy show. But
I'll
yeah, the
bet.
Queen's Gambit was wonderful, except that again, I think they minimized the problems that a woman like that would really face.
Mm,
They really played down the sexism aspect of. I mean, I follow a lot of these women grandmasters too, and even they were kind of like, I'm glad they're doing it. I'm glad it was, you know, showing them could be the equals and everything, but they were kind of rolling their eyes at, yeah, I'm sorry, this wouldn't happen that way.
right.
By
Right.
the way, do you know Jim Harmon? You know Jim, right? He was on the No
Probably.
Fluff tour briefly. He taught Android classes.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I learned a lot of Android from him. Well, he's also a chess player, and he was
Okay.
at a tournament about a month ago, and he won a game against a much higher rated player. It's really amazing. He showed me the game later. It did a beautiful job. So the tournament director before the next round said, "Can I have everybody's attention? I want to congratulate Jim Harmon." And he's like, "What? What is it going to do?" For his daughter Beth's victory over Borgov in the Russian Invitational. It had
Wow.
never occurred to me that my friend Jim Harmon had the same last name as the hero of Queen's Gambit,
Funny.
Beth Harmon.
Hey.
It was really funny. I mean, it's just a riot. I guess
Speaking
you
of
had
the
to be there.
newsletter, this is something I was thinking about this morning.
Mm.
How did you decide to do a newsletter? I mean, it seems like a lot of work.
It basically is that every time I'd meet with some of my friends, we'd have to spend all this time just catching up on what was going on. And I realized that I could make a newsletter for my one person company that would say what I've been doing recently
Sure.
each week. And therefore, it wouldn't have to be long or detailed or anything. It would just be, what did I run into this week? And I said to my wife, I'm going to try to do it every couple of weeks or once a month or something and just see what happens. And she rolled her eyes because, like, oh, yeah, you're not going to have anything to say. And now it's been almost 3 years. The end of this year will be 3 years. It's come out every
Crazy.
Sunday. And I just talk about whatever happened to come up this week and whatever I
Sure.
find interesting. And now always have links to tweets and links. And I really have fun with it because I'm not obligated to do anything. I'm just talking about what I found interesting that particular week.
Sure.
And it surprises me that anybody outside is interested in that. But again, it's free. I make sure it's free and always will be. And I've got
Yeah.
about, roughly 1,300 subscribers now.
That's awesome.
So it's small compared to real newsletters,
Sure.
but I know at least a dozen people in there actually read it
Yeah.
every once in a while.
Yeah.
You're a subscriber.
I
I don't know if
have.
you
Yes,
actually
I
know.
have read it. I
I don't assume people do, but at any rate, it's my way of communicating with my friends. That's what it really feels like. It's, hey, you
sure.
want to know what's going on? Here's what I happen to see. This is what I find interesting. And I tend to be involved in a lot of different things.
Yes, you
So
do.
it's also a bit of a record of what's been
Sure.
going on, a bit of a diary, I guess, of what's going on in my world for what
S-
it's worth.
So speaking of chess, Deathpack says he used to play or she used to play competitive chess in college. Might have to get back into it. Do you have any advice for somebody who wants to get into the chess game?
Uh, the Lichess server, lichess.org, is free, and you can watch the grandmasters battle it out there if you want, or you can play and get together with friends and play there. What I do basically is I have a couple friends that I meet there periodically, and we set up a Zoom call so we could sometimes talk during the game because sometimes it's more social activity than anything else.
Sure.
Also, I use a couple of the courses from Chessable.
Okay.
Chessable.com has courses you can purchase that give you like forced repetition and everything. But I don't do that as much as I thought I would. It's mostly getting involved in the community again, and that will point you to lots of opportunities.
Sure.
Did an explosion during the pandemic because it was the only sport going for a lot of
Right.
it.
Right.
Remote online chess. And
Yeah.
Magnus Carlsen's a wonderful world champion to follow. So I
Sure.
really enjoy
Sure.
that.
So interesting you bring that up because I know when you were first on the show, I think we all kind of had the idea that pandemic would end eventually,
Oh,
and
yeah.
let's just say this fall hasn't gone the way I expected. I genuinely thought we'd be back on road. Everything would be not it'd be to be a new normal, but
Mm.
it would be more normal, and that has not been the case. And I
Well, I
was
got
just
my booster shot. I got that last weekend. So,
excellent, excellent.
it turns out, you need at my age, you need some extra excuse or whatever,
Sure,
affiliate condition, and anything counts practically, including obesity. And it's like,
right,
okay, yeah, all right.
right.
I mean, you could round up practically the whole country qualifies under
Well,
that one.
that's the thing I find hilarious when you look at the restrictions. It's like, well,
Yeah,
that actually is about 85% of the population. So,
exactly. No, I agree with you. I was hoping we'd be back to normal and traveling and everything.
right,
And we have a dedicated group of people fighting it. And it's just going to take longer as a result. And I mean, we're seeing all these conferences being pushed to the new year and everything. I got to admit, though, I was in the process of converting my business to online anyway. So I've been kind of okay with that. It hasn't hurt me directly in any way. It was nice being able to see people at a conference recently, but
sure,
I can deal with. I did get tired of the airlines and travel and stuff, so I don't mind waiting a little bit longer, but
Sure.
if it goes on another year, that's going to be really hard. I have a feeling though that because everybody's kind of down about it, we're really going to be opening up a lot in the next few months.
Yeah,
I mean, we're almost at 80% country-wise. You
getting
notice
there.
that, and now
Yeah.
they approved it for the 5 to 11-year-olds, so
Right.
that'll make
Right.
a big difference.
No, I think it's going to be interesting to see, and I guess my follow-up question is, I know you've done a few in-person events over the last
Mm.
couple months. How did it feel? What was the reaction? Was it nice to be back in front of people? Was it a little weird,
Well,
other
the
than the
interesting part is
caribou
they
not
were
being
all
open?
Oh, sorry. They were all hybrid, so that we had
Yeah.
in-person people and we had remote. And fortunately, I now have enough experience with the remote that I didn't forget about them. Made sure they
Mm-hmm.
were included. That's another management problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it was really different to actually be able to see people and see how badly the jokes were landing. And oh, that reminds me, I do have one gag for you. Um, I have a keyboard shortcut for this. Let me put it in here again, just a
Okay.
second.
While you're doing that,
Oh,
I got
geez, not coming up.
another comment from a viewer here, Goal High, says, talking about the boss. I was expecting my boss to know what I was doing from the emails that I CC'd him
Hmm.
on, but that's not the case. Also,
Ah,
my one-on-one usually ended up being with the work that was pending or planned, and I think that's another interesting point too. That again, it's kind of on us to be the ones that make sure those messages get across. And
well, one of the ways I played that, I don't know if this works or not. This is very manipulative, so it may not work. When we wanted to schedule a meeting, I would always ask for 20 minutes
mm,
because nobody in the history of organizations has ever scheduled a 20-minute meeting, right? They always schedule half an hour and hope to end
right,
early.
right,
So I plan to have the what's going on, what have you done, what are you planning to do stuff in the first 20 minutes. And then, if necessary, take a few minutes to say, oh, by the way, let me let you know what I've been thinking about and what I'm on and all that stuff. And of course, they're not thrilled, but it's not like they're scheduling anything for that last 10 minutes
sure,
anyway.
sure,
So it's a mechanism you could try to get started because a lot of
mm,
that is really getting started. And you have to push back, as you say.
right,
Now,
right.
the gag was, how does a programmer escape a shark? And there I put it in the chat. It's just for the people who can't see
Let me
it. Are
see
you
if
going to
I can
paste it in
paste
the
this in
tweet,
the. We'll
in the
try to
Twitch?
put this. We'll try to put this on a Twitch. We'll see
Yeah, I have
what
a
happens
keyboard
here.
shortcut for that. It's /shark.
Copy. Of course, you have that as a keyboard. I
Yeah.
don't know what's gonna happen when I paste this.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it works. I think. Yeah, there it is. How do you escape a
Yeah,
shark? So there you
exactly.
go. The system works, buddy.
So /shark. That's how a programmer escapes a shark. Yeah. I thought you'd like that.
Code humor, right? We're see
Yeah.
this reminds me of you've seen Silicon Valley. Did you ever watch that show on HBO?
I didn't like it. I watched
Okay,
some of it, but those were annoying people doing annoying things, and I don't like shows like that.
that's fine. It was pretty funny, and I thought much
Hmm.
closer to reality for software than it really should have
That was
been.
the problem. If I hadn't been in software, I think I would have enjoyed it more.
Fair point, but there is this scene where the lead character breaks up with this woman over tabs versus spaces,
Oh, yeah. Well, I get that.
and
Yeah.
I about fell off the couch laughing. This is one of
Oh,
the
yeah.
funniest things that I thought I'd ever seen, right? And Christine just kind of stared at me, and I attempted to explain it to her, and it got no funnier for her, so she still just shakes her head.
No, that I get. I mean, are you a tabs or a spaces person?
So as an architect, I really don't have a position on that because whatever the team wants to adopt is fine. That's the
Very
one I prefer
diplomatic.
as well.
Yeah.
Yep. So that
See,
is
whereas
not the
as a
hill I'm
book
going to die on.
author, as a book author, the problem with tabs is that they come out all wrong in the
Mm,
formatting of books.
good point.
So I want to hit the tab key and have it replace the tab with spaces so
Yep.
that the spaces are the right number
Right.
for your situation. So it's a weird hybrid of both. And it mostly comes not from the source code. I do want to be able to hit tab in the source code just to save myself some typing,
Sure. Sure.
but it's mostly when you have to do markdown or ASCII doc or even heaven help us Word, that I want to be able to make something look like what I want and not load it into something else with different tab stops and totally mess everything up.
Sure. Sure.
But I have a VI and an Emacs joke, by the way. I can give you that one. You
By
can
all
feel free to
means.
reuse these.
100%. We're way ahead of you.
VI or Vim is, I've been a Vim user for 5 years, mostly because I can't figure out how to get out.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
That's one. And then for the smug Emacs people, you go with Emacs is a wonderful operating system lacking only a decent editor.
Yes.
Yeah,
I actually have that quote in one of my talks, and
there
I
you
don't
go.
have the. I've been a Vim user because I couldn't figure out how to get out. Like, although I
Well,
will admit, on more than one occasion, I found myself in VI or Vim, and I'm like, God dang it, how do I get out of this thing again? And I have to Google it, and then I feel like an idiot.
I know like half a dozen Vim commands because it's everywhere.
Yeah,
And I don't know any more. And I periodically go through some tutorial to get better at it. And then in the intervening time, I forget all those commands.
right.
It's just that's a problem of getting older. I just don't memorize the way I used to when I was a
Yeah.
kid. I was a freaking sponge. Now it's like I got all half those Star Trek episodes memorized and stuff. But now it's like, oh man, it's really hard to memorize anything.
So Neil says 100% enter as a tab, but have it come out as spaces.
Yeah, right.
Oh,
It
maybe
just
that's the
solves a
answer.
lot of problems that way. Of course, I wrote the last book. I did that in IntelliJ in Markdown. That was another weird thing is that O'Reilly uses a Git repository and ASCII doc, which I really liked.
Yeah.
And Prags are still on, believe it or not, wait a minute, okay, CVS, believe it
Really?
or not. Yeah, and they use a weird hybrid of Markdown and PML, which is their own pragmatic
Yep.
markup language.
Yep.
So they've got XML and Markdown mixed together. So of
Oh,
course the IDE thinks half of your file is an error no matter what you do.
right.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
I know. I'm waiting for them. Well, it's that first mover problem. They got there
Yeah.
first and they were way ahead of everybody, and now they're locked in, and it's going to take a
Right.
huge effort to refactor their system to
Yeah,
bring it into the 21st century. Yeah.
that's a great point because when they first came up with that tool chain, it was amazing. It was light
Yeah.
years ahead of what everybody else was doing, in my opinion, as an author. And
And now they're 20 years behind.
right, because it's
And
hard to
anyway,
justify the effort of transitioning off that tool chain since they've already got so many things baked into it. Yeah, that is an interesting problem. I mean, you see
I
that
mean,
a
they're
lot in
wonderful
software, but
people,
yeah,
but that's the most frustrating thing about working with them is that
sure,
you're stuck with CVS, and I'm like, wait a minute, what the heck were my CVS commands again? I got
right.
to go look things up, and you can't make a branch or merge easily, and it's like, geez, well, it's a good thing I'm the only author, kind of thing. It really is a very different challenge. Whereas, but I got to admit, back when I wrote the Manning book, I had to use Word,
Yeah,
believe it or not. Yeah.
I think everybody who's written a book at one point you had to do something in Word or a word
Mm.
processor, and it's just
It
to
was
write a
just
passage,
easier, believe it or not.
just to
Yeah.
write a passage. Way you go, and you just plow through it.
But code was always an adventure that way.
Oh, of course
Yeah.
it was. Of course it was.
Yeah.
Well, you got anything interesting coming up? Are you and I going to be in the same meet space anytime in the next, say, 6 to 12 months?
Um, we were going to be, I mean, Pratik's dev conference in December just got postponed. So
Okay.
that's going to be online. And the No Fluff conferences, I was only scheduled for one more. That was the Chicago event, and
Mm,
that just got postponed.
interesting.
So I don't have anything on the calendar conference wise that's in person. So it would have to be for, say, a mileage run before the end of the year to try to preserve my status because I'm going to lose it.
Oh, everybody's pushed them out, though. I mean, at least I
Well,
know.
they were pushed out to this year. Will they be pushed out another year?
Oh, they
That's the
already
one.
have. At
Oh,
least
I hope
Delta
so.
and United, I'm quite certain, have pushed theirs. I think Bonvoy has done the same thing. I think
Oh, I
everybody's
hope
figured
United
out
has.
that everything now expires in 23 instead of in 22. And
And by the way,
interestingly,
you were right about Marriott versus H Honors for Bonvoy versus H Honors. Yeah, because
just
I've
has
stayed in some H
bigger
Honors
footprint.
hotels, and oh, it's terrible.
Bigger
And the
footprint.
Bonvoy ones have been fine.
Yeah. The thing that is fascinating to me about I think this is what Delta's approach will be is if you requalified on miles and spend in 21, you
Mm,
have a higher priority than
mm.
somebody who is carrying over. So that could potentially, so you might lose an upgrade to somebody who qualified. Although I'm still kind of scratching my head thinking like flying enough in 21 to justify all that,
Right.
but
Well, it
it
looks
is
like
me.
Tim Berglund is. Are you going to be out on the road anytime soon?
In theory, in December, I'll have my first international trip as well as a trip
Mm,
to Florida. In theory, but I was supposed to be in the UK in November. That got pushed to May.
right.
So, I was fingers crossed.
I just have a feeling, though. I mean, again, it's not based on any real evidence other than the fact that we are practically at 80% in this country.
Getting
I
there.
really think that things are really going to surprise everybody by opening up in the new year. by
Yeah.
back to spring, we will be traveling a lot again,
Yeah.
potentially.
No, I think it's coming. It'll be interesting to see what winter looks like. Do we see
Yes.
another little resurgence when it gets cold and people are back indoors all the time?
And will
I
there be
know,
another variant? Yeah.
right. I mean, I know like one of our local schools, I heard somebody tell me last week that like 100 of the students out of a population of 2,000 were positive as of like last
Oh,
week, which that's a fairly high percentage right there. So I do wonder what's going to happen if more indoor activities happens. People start getting together for holidays. I've given up trying to predict. I mean, I will never forget being in New York right as this thing was kind of starting, and we were
mm.
all just like, "It's the flu. This is no big deal." And then the whole world shut down like 2 weeks later. Later, you know.
I mean, my last conference was DevNexus in February. And like a lot of people, because there were so many people at that conference. And then by early March, it was like, wait, didn't you wear a mask or something? Or what was going on there? And,
Right,
you know,
right, yeah. In retrospect, but
but
the
we've
code
been
with Sean.
fortunate, at least in my family so far.
Yeah, well, and boosters help. There's no getting around that. So, Code with Sean said that he wrote a book in Word, used a template from a
Mm,
fellow author. Yep. And
mm.
then Neil Ted Lasso would relate quitting VI to the offsides in football. I know it when I see it, but don't ask me to explain it.
Okay. Okay.
I'm with you. I'm with you there. Yeah.
I can
Cool.
see that.
Yep.
I mean, I used these back in the 80s and the
Right.
90s. I mean,
Right.
come on, it's our Neil, Neil Ford is still dedicated to Emacs. And,
Yes. Yes.
it's like, really? And
Yep.
like I said, I had a .emacs file in the 90s. You know how many hard drive crashes ago that was? I
Right. Right.
mean, that was my Lisp implementation, right? And your Emacs Lisp and use that all the
Hmm.
yeah, that's long ago and far away.
Yeah, I probably could get back into it now since I have like one machine that goes with me everywhere, so I don't have to
Mm.
deal with, well, that's not my work, won't let me install that kind of a thing. And I know he has infected others or other people that are Macs because.
Well, that's the problem with Neil. He's very persuasive.
Yeah, well, I mean,
And
I've certainly stolen some of his lines, and whether
yeah.
although I'll never forget, and I wish I remembered the line, but I tweeted something out, and someone said, "Well, that's very profound," or whatever. I said, "Well, I didn't come up with it. I got it from,
Hmm.
let's just say, Stein." And then Stein said, "Well, I didn't come up with it. I got it from," and that went on for like 6 or 7
Hmm.
revolutions until someone's like, "Well, I don't think I invented it, but okay." I mean, it's hilarious how those sort of phrases get co-opted. And
Well, it's like that lieutenant in the army named Murphy who came up with Murphy's Law. They know who he is now, but
really.
it's Murphy's Law that he never got credit until much, much later. And of course, never made any money from it.
Right, right.
There actually was a Murphy and he actually coined this law.
Oh
So,
my God, that's
uh-huh.
hilarious. Oh man. Well, my friend, we've been rambling here. I'm sure you got something better to do with your afternoon. I wish you were here. I'd play you a shot of espresso. We
Oh man, I need to make that mileage run just for that.
you're always
People
welcome
don't
here.
know you get deal. Nate has this $5,000 espresso
No, no,
machine.
no,
It's
no. My espresso machine is very moderate. No, I have a much better grinder now than when you were here. It
oh
actually
wow.
weighs the dose. So you put your portafilter on there, it tears out, and then it dumps in 18 grams.
I
So
like the fact
and
you
it
call
does
it a
it
dose too. That's great.
well, what else would it be?
Well, I'd take my caffeine with a patch if I could. I mean, just something
Uh
to
just IV that
bypass
stuff,
the
man.
stomach.
What are you gonna do?
But no, I would love to come and try out the new coffee
You're
maker. I
more
mean,
than
I'm
welcome to anytime,
I'm still
anytime.
stuck on Keurig, so
Oh no, we can do better than that for sure. And oh, so Neil said, or quote Sean says, when I start wearing red glasses, then we know Neil's influence is strong. And so the ironic thing to me is my favorite color is red. And
ah,
so I feel like Neil stole that from me. And now I feel
mm,
like I couldn't wear red glasses because then I'd be stepping on Neil's toes. But my bike that's just to my right, it's red. Just got a new car, it's red. I
oh,
have a ton of red in my closet to the point where when it comes time to wear something, Christine's like, "Could you wear something other than red?"
did you
So,
forget to wear it for today?
well, I normally don't wear red on video because it tends to be kind of a
Ah,
little fuzzy, and I always try to wear a shirt that has something to do with my guest. But
well,
I
I
don't have
have an
anything for
IntelliJ
Connecticut.
shirt. My IntelliJ shirt is red that says "Keep calm and Alt Enter." So
Absolutely. So I figured, knowing how big a fan of you were of IntelliJ, I'd wear an IntelliJ shirt that has IntelliJ instructions on it. And I am wearing this is a spring hoodie,
oh yes, of course.
so I do try. I do. Sometimes it's easier than others.
Well, I
Some
didn't
weeks.
wear my cetacean ops sweatshirt, also for lower decks, but
Totally
you know,
fine. Totally
next
fine.
time.
Next time. We'll have to have and I'll have to come up with another title, a better title than the next one with Ken Kousen. We'll have to pick the other one with Ken Kousen, or
Well, as
something
we've
like that.
established, naming things is hard.
It's
Yes.
very hard. That's why all of my shows follow a very similar naming pattern, because that's easier for my little brain to understand.
What is it?
So,
Naming things and cache invalidation and off by one errors. Like, you know, I know there's
and
another
then
one,
there's
but I
one other
can't
thing.
remember.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. No, n-1 is my life. So.
Ah, very good.
All right, my friend. I appreciate your time. Thank you for hanging out with me. Congratulations on the book. That's fantastic. I remember seeing an early iteration of that presentation, and I'm delighted to see how much mileage you've gotten out of that. And I know it's good info, and so I'm delighted you finally put that into prose form. So
Well, thank you for the honor of being a repeat guest on
first one,
BCAC.
first
Even
one,
though
first returning champion.
even though it's still in my head, BCAC the other way between keyboard and chair. But all right, I'll go between chair and
But
keyboard.
let me explain why though. This is so you are probably familiar with SIG Chi in the ACM, which is computer human interaction.
Right.
But we all realize, of course, that you shouldn't put the computer first. The human should be first. So it is referred to by practitioners as human computer interaction, HCI,
Right.
but yet SIG Chi sticks around because it's been around forever. And so I put chair in front of keyboard because the human comes first.
That's nicely rationalized, but the human's the problem either way. It's perfect.
I'm not disagreeing
Yeah.
with you, but I'm just saying that the human comes first.
Okay.
Anyway.
Thanks a lot, man. You
Thank you,
take
my
care.
friend. So I'm off next week. I'm going to actually be playing golf in the coast of
Oh, good for
Oregon,
you.
apparently. So fingers crossed that this bomb cyclone works its way out before I get out there, because there's no such thing as we'll just take the day off. It's like you're there, you're playing, unless they close the
Right.
course down. So I'm
Yeah, good
hoping
luck.
the weather works itself out over the next week. But I guess that'd be I want to say the 8th of November. I don't know. I don't do well with time anymore. We'll have another returning guest, if you can believe that. So Sharat will be back. We didn't get into a lot of Java stuff that I wanted to ping him on. So I'm quite certain we'll be talking about what's new in Java and long-term support and all that kind of fun stuff.
That's the right guy to talk to.
I figured as much, and I'm probably going to wear a Java t-shirt. That one.
I think that's probably a good plan. I mean, get on his good side before you lay into the Oracle licensing stuff.
No. I'm not. I don't bring up things like that. I'm not mean. I'm just hoping that he'll send me some swag. That's the other part of it. Rumor
Oh,
has it he's
hey,
got boxes and boxes of swag, and so
you can be bribed. I didn't realize.
I can
Okay,
totally
now
be
I know.
bribed. And he
Yeah.
has my home address, so
Like
anytime
I'll
that
send you a
swag.
copy of the book, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, of course, if you get a physical copy, I'll take it too. I can
No,
always.
I mean I'll get you the PDF.
That's fine too. I like PDFs.
Okay.
Anyway, well, my best to your lovely wife, and I genuinely
you.
hope we're in the same meet space soonish for some value
Yes.
soon. So,
Good luck. Yeah.
cheers, my
Thanks
friend.
a lot, man. Take care.